Hi everybody, I'm Kimberly. Welcome to my kitchen for this week's Juicy Deliciously Wildtree Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your likes and shares, your views, and would ask that if you could please take time to share with your family and friends who might be interested in this delicious recipe. We're starting off a new month here. Can you believe it's November 4th already? And Wildtree has put together another great bundle of products in this month's Autumn Fair Cooking Collection. I'm just going to touch briefly on what's included this month, and stay tuned to my Facebook page because I'm going to be putting together a presentation that will talk a little bit more about the bundle, and you'll be able to get a free meal plan and the recipe cards for all of the 8 recipes in the bundle for that. So that will be on in the next day or two. In this month's bundle, the limited edition product from Wildtree is the spiced cranberry jam, and this is so good. I've gotten it in the past. It's only available around the holiday season. It's great for using on a cheese board and that, to make hors d'oeuvres. And later this month, I know I'm going to be including this for a cranberry cheesecake swirl recipe that I can't wait for our Thanksgiving. Next, we have an Ethiopian spice blend. If you like world flavors, this spice blend adds a warm, spicy heat to different foods. So we're going to be doing a Berberi shrimp curry, and I think that that's next week's Wildtree Wednesday. Trying to remember for sure, but I know that that one is coming up. And then we've got our Blazing Buffalo blend, which we'll be doing a buffalo shrimp po' boy sandwich, and it's great for we're doing a non-sloppy Joe chicken slider and that with that. And then today's featured product in this recipe is the Rancher Steak Rub. So I just wanted to touch on all of those and let you know a little more about those seasonings that are in this month's bundle. I'll just set those over there. To get started today, this was such a cool recipe, and I hadn't thought of doing this myself before. Whenever we've made acorn squash in the past, I grew up, and maybe you did too, always cutting the squash lengthwise of the squash. And then, of course, you scoop out the seeds and you roast each half that way. Well, this time for this recipe, and I believe that this goes back to our friends at Better Homes and Gardens. Leave it to Better Homes and Gardens. I've loved that magazine ever since I was a little girl. My mom subscribed to it. But what they've done is you're going to break off the stem of the acorn squash. You're going to cut it in half. And I'll just show you one of the halves here without making too much of a mess. So when you cut it in half, you end up, of course, this is my pre-roasted acorn squash. I got started on this recipe last night, but I've cut it in half and you can see all the nice little scallops around. It's a really unique way of doing it. Makes a very pretty presentation on the plate. And then so that it sets well in the bottom of the pan, I just took my knife and I cut a little bit off the ends to make it flat. You also could take some aluminum foil, scrunch it up, and then set the squash into the pan in the aluminum foil. And I'll just grab this quick and tip it a little bit so that you can see. These were roasted last night. They're nicely done, and they set perfectly in the bottom of the pan. So that's a real fun way to do the squash. So next here, I have too much on my counter. I'll set my squash over there. So next here, I'm going to get started. We've got, and I'm making half of the recipe today. Again, in these recipes, they're set up, they're easy, especially if you go to the G Free Deliciously website, so that you can adjust the serving sizes and everything. When I put them on the site in my take, it won't be the links to the Wildtree cards, but in my links on the specific posts is the recipe card, my recipe card. And so I will always have the slider available. The oil that I used, you could use any cooking oil. I prefer like a canola oil if I'm buying an oil off of the shelf from the store. But the cooking oil I've used today is the Wildtree natural grapeseed oil. It's wonderful, wonderful, and it's a direct swap out for your cooking and baking. I love this oil because it's very high heat oil. And then I've added in my onion. The recipe calls for half an onion, and I used about a quarter cup of onion, and then the recipe also calls, the full recipe also calls for a stalk of celery. And again, because I'm only making half the recipe here, I've used only about half of that stalk of celery. I'm just turning up my heat a little bit. That's going to get started. And again, the celery, and that starts to break down as it cooks and the onions become translucent. And next, I'm going to add in my sausage. What I do, and I discovered this a while ago, and I thought how handy. Instead of buying bulk sausage these days, I buy brats. You can get original non-seasoned brats for just a plain sausage. Today I'm using an Italian sweet sausage, and what I do is actually each brat, I've used 2 brats for a half a pound of sausage. So each brat is about a quarter pound, and it's cool because then it's all measured out for you. And I just grab 2 brats. I keep them, you know, I'll bring home a box. You can get the boxes, they'll have them on sale at the store. And I'll bring home those boxes with several brats in it. And I usually suck and seal them in freezer safe bags, and that at 2 in a bag, which is about the right size for us. Of course, if you had a larger household, you know, just go ahead and freeze those up in the amounts that you would typically use for your recipe, whether you're a larger or smaller family. So this is cooking up real good here. You're going to want a medium to medium high heat, and this only takes a few minutes to get this sausage all going and started. Last night I roasted the squash ahead of time, and the wonderful thing about doing this is that it saves very easy once you roast it. You're going to want to bring it down to room temperature before putting it in the fridge, and so I just covered my baking dish with a little saran wrap after that cooked down to save it until today's program. And I'll just let that set there for a minute. So you're going to want to cook the sausage until all of the meat is no longer pink, and that you'll follow the steps, the directions in steps 2 and 3 of the recipe, and that I have here. And after the sausage and onion mixture has finished cooking up, you will put in the apples. Today, I'm also going to be adding in some cranberries with this, and you'll add in the sage. I love this recipe's flexibility. Again, I've never been one to necessarily cook from a recipe. I've always put my spin on the specific recipe. And if you're a busy business person or working, even if you're working from home, in that you can cook all the parts of this recipe ahead of time, including the filling. Just make sure that you bring that down to room temperature before you put it into your refrigerator, so that your refrigerator doesn't need to work too hard to cool that down. And that's going to last for 2 to 3 days in the refrigerator. So you could actually prep it on Sunday or Saturday when you have more time over your weekend to have for a quick dinner during the week. Then when you're ready, to eat it, it's just a matter of assembling it and heating it up when you're ready to eat it. This recipe will also work really well, and it's easy to take along to if you wanted to get it all ready to go. And that's cooked up nicely here. So now I'm going to add in my apples. I've used about half of an apple, and my fresh sage. I still have a little left over from my garden, and grabbing in the remainder of the rancher steak rub that it calls for in the recipe. I think I've got about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon here that I'm just adding in. And of course, the cranberries. I love the pop of flavor that the cranberries bring to this. And we're going to let that kind of simmer in place here for 2 to 3 minutes while those apples cook down just a little bit. You want to have your apples be firm but not mushy at all. And the right amount of time. I played around with cooking apples like this before, and the right amount of time is about 2 to 3 minutes for those to really break down and still be firm without becoming mushy at all. while that does that, I bring out my notes here so that I remember everything that I wanted to tell you today. I wanted to talk a little bit about apples. My favorite apple of all time is a Honeycrisp apple. It was developed up in Minnesota, and it's great for eating. It's crisp, it's juicy. The taste is kind of a sweet, tart taste in flavor, and it's good for baking and applesauce, using in recipes such as this that we're doing today. In looking for an apple to use in cooking, you always want to look for apple that's firm, not too juicy, because if it's a very, very juicy apple, it will become mushy. Another good selection would be a Braeburn or a Granny Smith apple. I've used both. Braeburn is an older variety, I think, and the flavor of a Braeburn apple, they're pretty easy to find. The flavor is a tart flavor, and again, it remains firm. It's an all-purpose apple, and it is perfect when you don't want the filling of like a pie to be over juicy. So you can use it in pies, in tarts, those sorts of things, and that. So that's that about the apples, and I'll just give this another quick stir. This is the smells in that. I really, really love all of the warm, wonderful smells this time of year in the kitchen. They're really different from summertime smells. I love the smells of food that we cook during the summertime too. Oh, one thing I just thought of as well, and I found this out kind of by accident almost, and I think a lot of people get confused like I do. We had went to the store and we were in a hurry, so we picked up some delicious apples, and with the idea that we were going to make an apple pie. And those did not work well at all for making an apple pie. Delicious apples are more for an eating apple. Now, when you're at the grocery store and if you look up at above where the apples and that are kept in the fruit section, you will notice that most grocery stores do have little cheat sheet sort of guides for you where they'll tell what the apple is really, really good for. So that's cooking up. I'm just going to pop over here and start my broiler so that preheats a little bit and gets going. Welcome back. Sorry about that, technical difficulties. That doggone zombie from last week must have been messing with everything here. So we've got the all the ingredients in the pan. This is where we kind of left off, and that I got my toaster oven with the broil preheating, and so I was talking about the different ways that you can use it. Of course, I added cranberry to the mix that I'm making today, and that you would add that about step 3. You can make this paleo with for an apple sausage acorn squash as well. If you're wanting to make it for a paleo diet, and paleo, I'm not sure how that's enunciated, and that you would omit the cheese and ensure that you are using a paleo-friendly sausage for the filling. If you are looking for a little more heartiness in the recipe, you could add a whole grain. So you would stir in a cup of wild rice or cooked wild rice or cooked quinoa in that. And quinoa is actually technically a seed, but it is included as certified whole grain in that. So you would put that in there, and it's an excellent source of plant protein and fiber in that to make it a little more hearty of a recipe. You could give it a nutty crunch by adding in some toasted walnuts or pecans. That would be wonderful. Shroom it up with mushrooms. In the stage where you would be adding your celery and your onion, just go ahead and put in about a cup of sliced button mushrooms, and then add the sausage and let those mushrooms cook down at that stage of the recipe. Another way, if you don't particularly like acorn squash, you could use spaghetti squash for this. So you would roast up the spaghetti squash ahead of time. After it's done roasting, and that you would just take a fork to kind of shred up the pulp in there and then push it around in the sides to make a well that you would put your apple and sausage mixture, stuffing mixture into. And you also could make it vegetarian by swapping out the sausage with a 15-ounce can of butter beans or cannellini beans. Cannellini beans are a white kidney bean. Think minestrone soup. And those are the beans that are typically used in that type of soup. And when making that version, you would add the onion and celery in step 2 of the recipe card, and then you would continue with steps 3. So I'm just grabbing the acorn squash here, and this is our stuffing is all nice and cooked, no more pink in the sausage. So I'm just going to set that there, and we'll scoop the filling mixture into the halves. You want to kind of push it down a little bit as you're filling that up. Get it in there. And depending on the size of your squash, you may have a little bit of the filling mixture left over. You could use that with pasta, or you could mix it in with eggs. That would be really yummy for a breakfast, and that to bring everything together. And then as the last thing before you broil this, you're going to use a little bit of Parmesan cheese over the top. And you also could use a Romano, an Asiago. We most always have Parmesan cheese on hand in our house. So I'm just bringing this over. I'm going to put it in the broiler. You see me jump there. I know you did. I hit the edge of my hand on the oven rack. So yeah, it's just going to set there for 2 to 3 minutes and broil away. The top is going to be slightly crunchy and crispy a little bit. The cheese is going to become melty, and everything's going to warm through with that. So when you order a bundle from the Wildtree recipe collection, whichever month you order from, you will get a recipe card that looks kind of like this. And that it's a digital recipe card, and you can go ahead and print these out. I print them double-sided. And one of our viewers a few weeks back had a really great idea. She said she uses an accordion file, and she puts the different recipes cards into that, so after she's printed them, so that she can refer back and make the recipe again. I thought that was a super duper example or tip that she had, so that you're not wasting them. And the nice thing about the recipe cards is that it does give you a grocery list on the front. It tells you the amount of servings that the recipe will make, the prep time, the cook time, and all the nutritional information. And also it will give you your ingredients on the back, the kitchen tools that you need. In 5 to 6 steps, it will explain exactly how to make the recipe. So if you're new to the kitchen, that's an easy way for everybody to make these. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit also about what I'm doing, because I really hate being too salesy. But for those of you who want to know a little bit more about the bundles and the recipes, I'm going to start doing monthly, kind of a digital version of my monthly recap of all the recipes that will be coming out during the month. So I'll talk a little bit more about each individual spice, what the components of the spice are. I will get that all together, and that will be where you can sign up through Zoom to be part of that Zoom where we'll go through all of that. And this is smelling really, really good and starting to brown up beautifully. I'll just set those there while I plate everything up and grab my plate here. So when you join that Zoom, as part of it, you also, I'm going to be giving anyone who signs up absolutely free, so you can get this without having to, and this is kind of hot, you can get this without purchasing the recipes. This is a free Zoom, and it's easy because you can download the Zoom app. So, and I'm going to sprinkle a little snowflake of chopped parsley over top. So when you sign up through the Zoom and that, you also will get the digital recipes and the meal plan as being part of the Zoom. It's absolutely free, no strings attached. And I think that you'll love having that to be able to refer to. So here is, and I'm hoping that that's not going to slide off the plate, and that I just want to show you how pretty that is, and we'll set it there so that the cameraman can take a picture in just a moment. So that wraps up, sorry for the technical difficulties today, that wraps up our Wildtree Wednesday. I hope you were able to get back into the live. I thank you again for being part of each week's Wildtree Wednesday in my kitchen. at G-Free Deliciously. Be sure to visit the website and enjoy our apple sausage stuffed acorn squash. Take care and have a wonderful week ahead. Bye-bye.